claim of fact I'll be responding to is that the negative impacts of global warming, or the negative impacts global warming has on the environment, is going to destroy all life on Earth for future generations. At the beginning of October, we heard speeches on everything from current welfare to the negative effects of pharmaceuticals. Today I'm here to respond to a speech given by Parissa Moore and her claim that negative effects global warming has on the environment is going to destroy all life on Earth. I'm going to do this by proving that her first claim about habitats everywhere being abolished because of global warming is incomplete, implausible, and incorrect. And that her second claim about the effects global warming has on humans is biased and outdated, making an incorrect assumption, and that one of her articles actually says something contradictory to what she is trying to prove. The first claim I'll be responding to by her said that habitats all around the world will eventually be abolished, leaving animals with a low chance of survival. The advocate neglected to include some evidence from her own source. She failed to add 2 sentences from her article from the EPA titled Plants, Animals, and Ecosystems. That follows her quote that says, "As the earth gets warmer, plants and animals that need to live in cooler places like on mountaintops or in the Arctic might not have a suitable place to live." The first quote that she neglected to say says, "Just like people, plants and animals will have to adapt to climate change." And following that, a quote from the EPA that says, "Many types of birds in North America are already migrating further north as the temperature warms." These 2 quotes tell us that life in areas affected by climate change is already adapting to the changing so far, so they are unlikely to be wiped out by further changes. The second point I have on her first supporting point is that she incorrectly reasons that rising temperatures will take out hundreds of animals. She states that taking one animal out of an ecosystem will ruin it, and that the rising temperatures of global warming will take out hundreds of other animals. But animals have proven to adapt and evolve to changes of temperatures in ecosystems. A paraphrasing of an article written by Kerr Than at lifescience.com tells us the theory of evolution states that organisms change over time in a way that allows them to adapt to changing environments so they can survive and have more offspring. This means that plants and animals would not have their ecosystems destroyed because they would be able to adapt to the rising temperatures of the environment and change to survive at these higher temperatures. My last point towards her first claim is that her claim that animals won't survive due to climate change is incorrect because the animals can adapt to changing climates, even in a single lifetime. The State of the Planet Earth Institute from Columbia University says that some animals seem to be adapting to changing conditions. They talk about plants and animals having phenotypic plasticity, which is, according to them, the ability of an organism to change its development, behavioral, and physical features during its lifetime in response to changes in the environment. Encyclopedia Britannica states that phenotypic plasticity likely occurs in all living things on planet Earth, and then goes on to say that to some degree, most living things can adapt to environmental changes by altering their phenotype. Emphasis on most living things. That means that her claim that more animals will be non-existent because of climate change is not true, because most animals can adapt to the heating temperatures in their own lifetime, let alone over the generations that will exist over slow climate change. The second claim that she made says global warming does not just affect animal life, but will also directly affect human life. The article the speaker used from the EPA is highly biased and outdated. She uses evidence from the Environmental Protection Agency to support her claim, who is highly biased against global warming. Their mission is to enforce regulations that protect plants and animal life from all sorts of things, so their opinion whether or not climate change affects plant and animal life would be highly skewed, as they look only for negative impacts from climate change. The article she references is also outdated by almost 2 years, being created in January of 2017 when it was written, and the references that they used, some come from as early as 2008, a little over 8 years before the article was written. The advocate assumes a relationship between pollution and climate change in her second point as well, but doesn't address that climate change climate change in her pursuing arguments. In her speech, she claims that the changes in climate will directly affect human health, but then goes on to talk about how pollution affects climate change without linking the two. She assumes that the causal relationship between pollution and climate change allows for the two to be used interchangeably, but then goes on to use pollution as a cause for separate effects that coexist with climate change, but aren't caused by climate change. She says that if we keep creating appalling levels of pollution, then the air quality will decrease, which changes her argument from climate change being what is affecting human health to pollution being what is affecting human health. Although the two might coexist and rise at the same time, to say that climate change causes health problems because of the air quality associated with pollution is to create a false cause. Her own article even disagrees with her statement of air quality worsening as climate change is occurring. The article she used by the EPA states that there have been significant improvements in U.S. air quality since the 1970s, which contradicts her claim that air quality will worsen over time. This contradiction leads to her comparison of climate change and health issues being unsupported by the article she gives. In conclusion, although well executed, Parisa did not give strong enough evidence to support the claim that global warming will destroy all life on Earth. And the evidence she did give was invalidated by the same article she quoted. Thank you.
All right, the structure's set up pretty clearly. On the first point, you go after it directly, suggesting a series of criticisms of the evidence that the advocate uses and presenting some counter evidence to suggest different results. I like the follow-up of the EPA evidence. For instance, it suggests that birds are already migrating further north as a way of compensating for changes in climate, which illustrates the point that you're talking about. The advocates seem to assume that there's not going to be some adaptation, and you are in essence are saying adapting is already taking place, and that kind of becomes your main theme on that whole first point, that this assumes that things stay static, and that you're in essence arguing that systems are evolutionary in nature, that they respond to changes, and the notion that people, hundreds of animals are going to be wiped out is extremely unlikely. I thought that that was explained pretty well. You had a good piece of evidence that came from the advocate's own source, and then you also had further evidence that showed that this adaptation is taking place right now and can occur within a single generation. It doesn't have to be over multiple generations. The one thing that you kind of added in there without providing much information is that climate change is a gradual process, that it's going to be taking a number of years. It's not like it's suddenly going to be different next year than it is this year. It's a long-term process, which means that the animal life cycles, for instance, will have plenty of time to adapt and alter their behaviors in a way that would allow them to continue to survive. So I think you could have used a little bit of evidence on that point. The signpost on the second point was pretty clear. You talk about bias on the EPA. I think that's maybe not as useful an argument for you as it could be. I think the better arguments had to do with the things that you were saying up above. You suggested that something that's 2 years old is out of date. I'm not sure why that is true. What has changed in the last 2 years? And then you say something that's 10 years old also is out of date, which may or may not be the case, but I think that we need to know what is different from 2 years ago or 10 years ago that suggests that this information that they're using is invalid in some way. The better argument that you had on this particular point is the analysis of how pollution is being associated with climate change, and that she's basically made an equivocation on these points that they are connected, when in fact there isn't a causal relationship that's going on there. And you have a good counterclaim that goes along with it, suggesting again, I think it's EPA information, who you say is biased, that the air quality has improved substantially since the 1970s. I think that that's a good illustration of a counterexample that undermines the sign reasoning that the advocate's using. Your summary argument's pretty good, suggesting that, look, the argument might be structured well and the claims sound good, but there's not evidence to support it and the reasoning's insufficient. That's fine. All right, thank you.